Today we celebrate our annual Mass for the city of Minneapolis, and this is an important Mass, and it's an important intention, certainly in a city that is reeling from harm and anxiety, violence, injustice, and questions about what our path ahead looks like. And so it's very fitting that we again celebrate this Mass on the actual feast of St. Anthony of Padua. My mind goes back to the days after the death of George Floyd. It was a tumultuous time in our city, as you remember, and there were sirens. I believe it was either Wednesday or Thursday of that week after Memorial Day, and I was sitting on the deck of the place that I used to live that overlooks the courtyard, and there were sirens and helicopters, and you could smell smoke. It was a very, very fraught time. People were very anxious. And I remember seeing on this bench here, right out to my right, a young black man and a young white man sitting seemingly oblivious to all that was going on and having a conversation. It was a very lively conversation and looked like two friends. Didn't look like they just met, but that they were, in fact, friends. And I was so struck by the contrast of all that had been going on, including the very, very sad death of George Floyd, and all of the tumultuous events that followed. And this scene, a young black man and a young white man in friendship, in dialogue, in fraternity, it gave me a sense of hope in this very, very challenging time. We have been celebrating this Mass for the city for at least the last 4 years. It was Mike Rainville's idea, and one of the things I appreciate about Mike is not only has he had a lot of good ideas over the years at Our Lady of Lourdes, he then implements them. And so it's one thing to be an idea person, it's another thing to know how to get things done. By the way, that's not an endorsement. He is a parishioner. I can say that. I can't endorse him from the pulpit, but I can say what is true. But in any event, so it was his idea to celebrate this Mass for the city of Minneapolis. And we do it on this feast day close to St. Anthony of Padua. Today on the feast of St. Anthony of Padua. Why? Because this first neighborhood was called the town of St. Anthony Falls, and later just St. Anthony. In fact, that was my assignment letter. It said Our Lady of Lourdes of St. Anthony. Now, the Chancery wants to change it back to Minneapolis. That's not going to happen. As long as I'm pastor, we're going to keep with St. Anthony, and we do have 3 of the 5 votes, so we're in good stead here. But in any event, to continue that tradition, this is the first neighborhood, and it is St. Anthony because Father Hennepin, his patron saint was St. Anthony, and when he saw the falls, he named them the Falls of St. Anthony after his patron saint. And so we thought it was a good and noble thing close to this feast day to celebrate Mass for the city of Minneapolis. The first one was celebrated by Archbishop Hebda down at Nicollet Island. In today's first reading, we hear the words of the prophet Ezekiel, and it comes after an allegory of 2 eagles. And we see with both Ezekiel, he prophesies an oracle of doom, but also an oracle of hope. Today we hear words of hope when seemingly all is lost. The Judeans are in Babylonian exile, and this is not for them a time of hope. And yet Ezekiel speaks hope into their tumultuous reality. He says things will get better because God will do it. This is what we hear at the end of the reading. And all the trees of the field shall know that I, the Lord, bring low the high. We think of the Magnificat, put down the mighty, lift up the lowly, wither up the green tree, and make the withered tree bloom. As I, the Lord, have spoken, so will I do. And of course, they saw evidence of this time and time again, God bringing them from captivity in Egypt to the promised land. This is the God that we believe in. And so, friends, it is a noble thing to offer this Mass for our city that is reeling and struggling in so many ways. It is a noble and good thing to open this prayer tent for the next 3 weeks to pray petitions to God, because we know that the God of Ezekiel, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Moses, the God of John the Baptist, Jesus Christ himself, incarnate God, has the power to turn around even the most challenging circumstances. We are not unlike the Judeans, in exile, emotional, cultural exile, a city and nation reeling from harm after a pandemic and injustice. And oh, by the way, we seemingly can't even have conversations about this. People afraid that they'll get canceled, afraid that they'll be decried for a slip-up, for saying what is a thing of good faith, but perhaps phrased in the wrong way. This is madness. We're on the edge of two extremes. One extreme that denies that there is in fact injustice and that it continues to be perpetuated in our land when all of the weight of the evidence suggests the otherwise, and the extreme that maybe we should just defund the police and just move on. We've seen the madness of that as well. The Catholic mind and truth and voice must be in the middle, holding things that are dialectically in tension such that we can have a just and prudent conversation about things that are so important without being afraid to be canceled in the midst of that. So where are we? What is revealed in our heart, as Pope Francis says? What will we do in this time when we meet the judgment seat of the Lord, as the second reading talks about? What will our recompense be? In this time of trial and struggle, did we do nothing? What did we do? Did we live by faith? Did we act by faith? Did we act with justice? Did we act with prudence? So here at this Mass for the city of Minneapolis, a city beset in so many ways, I'm going to suggest 3 things that we can do together as people of faith in this city and in this state and nation. First of all, to build networks of relationships of fraternity, of friendship, to encounter and journey with one another, to listen, to learn, to accompany, and also in compassion to respond to harm and injustice by building a more inclusive society, to step out of our comfort zone, to step out of our ideological construct. These are things that we can do together. Here's an example of how that happened. There was a group of us in the courtyard last summer, and we were having a conversation about what we could do. And a few people came up with an idea that we would accompany a family at Ascension Catholic School, a minority family, a family of color, and that we would help, and not only just help by giving them things, but to enter into relationship and friendship. And that has in fact happened, and that has been a positive thing. That is building a relationship of fraternity. Secondly, what can we do? We can act with prudence. This is not a prudent age, my friends. The extremes in our culture and in our politics suck the veritable oxygen out of the room. They are the ones that get the time on television. Many of them are in leadership, in politics. And rather than a prudential course forward, the extremes occupy the center of the conversation. And so we get ideas like defunding the police. We get other ideas that are not constructive to the common good. Is there need for reform? Absolutely. Is there a prudential and intelligent and reasonable way to go about it based in dialogue? Absolutely. And this is the path that we must set forth as we continue. Now, what is also unreasonable is to deny that there is a continuation of injustice in our land in all sorts of ways, across all sorts of categories. And we as people of God must be committed to justice, must be committed to truth according to our nature. This is who we believe in as a God of nature and a God of truth, and justice. And then thirdly, we can plant seeds of faith. Seeds of faith, small, humble acts of faith. Not grandiose, not in a way that calls attention to itself, but simply that comes from our integrated life. And what does God do with our small mustard seed of faith? He multiplies it. Just like the young boy who shared his loaves and fishes. He feeds everyone. He takes that small act of faith and makes extraordinary things happen. Look at St. Anthony of Padua. As a young man, he was an Augustinian, but he wanted to become a Franciscan. There were 5 martyrs that were celebrated in Seville, and he felt called to step out in faith, to live a life of radical discipleship, of poverty. He was a lover of humanity. He was a great preacher. He planted many seeds of faith. He embodied fraternity. He embodied prudence and justice. He embodied humble seeds of faith planted for the Lord. Friends in Christ, we are committed as Christians, as members of this community, as members of this city, perhaps for some or not most of you, we are committed to a future of fraternity, a future where we plant seeds of faith, where we act with justice, compassion, and yes, prudence as well. Please stand.